You are listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report, episode 177.5, the Combat Sports Report with Hanson Crafton. Hanson looks forward to the weekend's best fights in boxing and the UFC and recaps the recent events in the fighting world.
You're listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report with your host, Greg Mengelt.
Hahson Crafton is back to talk about a little bit of fighting, what happened last week, and then what's coming up this week. We're going to start, as we always do, Hanson, with what's coming up this weekend. And there's a card on ESPN. I was looking at the card, a lot of 10 and 12 round fights, so this is going to be a really good card.
Yes, it's a really, really good card. But I guess a little Valentine's Day massacre here at Madison Square Garden, fight capital of the world. But yeah, it's like a surprise. You don't really see this much in boxing, but recently it is something that's becoming more common. You're starting to get a lot of really good cards with guys fighting each other, having really good fights.
A lot of
I
depth.
love it.
A lot of
Yeah,
depth on the card.
yeah, and I mean, there's another really good one next weekend too. So I mean, we're starting back-to-back weekends of just two tremendous cards. I mean, next weekend I can't even control my excitement for the next weekend. I mean, it's just I can't wait for that one. But this weekend is just as good.
And it's
It's
free.
actually
And it's
yeah,
it's free on
ESPN.
ESPN, ESPN
What
Plus.
yeah, the bad thing is it's Top Rank's last card on ESPN, so they were unable
Mm.
to come to terms on a new contract. So Top Rank is leaving ESPN, so they're going out with a bang with this card here. There's six good fights that I'm really interested in on this card, so it's one very exciting.
Well, let's start at the top and the main event.
Yeah, main event you got the championship for the lightweight. It's a 135-pound class. You've got the champion Denis Burinch. I don't know how that.
That's
The
right.
guy from Ukraine.
You got it.
And then he's fighting Keyshawn Davis, who is a really good American prospect, young guy. He's looked really good his last few fights. His last fight, he's coming off just a few months ago. He fought Lemos, knocked him out in the second round. He knocked him down three times in the fight. Just a really good fighter. He's three of his last five fights are by stoppage. He's 12-0 with 8 KOs. Comes from a really good camp. That's one thing, that I always go into when I'm watching these fights is if I can't tell who the fighter is or if I don't know much about them, if I know who their trainer is or what camp they come from, that can tell you sometimes all you need to know. And this guy, he's trained by Bo Mack, who also trains Bud Crawford. So he comes from a really good camp. He's a really fast starter. And he's exciting. Keyshawn Davis is a name to keep an eye on. Like I said, he's up and coming, but he is coming. He's ranked 12th right now in his weight class in the world. He's actually ranked ahead of the champ right now, who's ranked 10th in the world. And he's also a huge favorite. I see the fight probably going to Davis. I think he actually probably stops him. But it will be a good fight. I think Dennis is a lot tougher than people are giving him credit for being. So I think he'll last just based on his toughness, but I don't think he'll make it. I think he gets out of there somewhere in the middle rounds. I'm going to say probably eighth round. Keyshawn will get him out of there.
Wow, he's that good, huh?
Yeah, he's really good. Like I say, he's super fast, got really good hand speed, kind of just like Crawford. He's got good hand speed, good movement. He's got good angles when he comes in, and he does come forward. Like I say, he's a fast starter, and he's a guy that looks like he really enjoys fighting. So he's very fun to watch. And then, like I said, Dennis is a tough guy. His last fight when he won the belt in May was a unanimous decision. Well, I think actually split the decision over in Novarati, but that's a formidable opponent. And that's a good fight. He's coming off four straight decisions. I don't think he's a big enough puncher to keep Davis off of him, because I think that's how you have to fight Davis is you're gonna have to hit him with something to hurt him, kind of get him to slow down and not be as on you as like he would like to do. But I don't think Dennis has that. He's like I say, he's got four straight decisions. Out of 19 wins, he only has 9 KOs, so he's not that big of a puncher. And I think that's going to be the difference in the fight. I just don't think he's going to be able to keep Davis off of him, and I think Davis eventually will get the finish.
And I'm guessing you don't even think that's the best fight of the night. Speaking of up and coming, Xander Zayas is 20-0. He goes against Slava Spomer, who's also 20-0 in one of the best divisions in boxing history, the super welterweight division. That might be as good a fight, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually really looking forward. Like I said, I think Keyshawn probably gets Dennis out of there with the Xander fight. I don't know. I mean, you're looking at number 8
Right.
in the world versus number 9 in the world. I think Xander's probably. I think he's the favorite. Might be decent size favorite. I think when I looked earlier, he was like minus 300 maybe. Um, he may. That's who I'm leaning towards, but that one can go either way. I mean, those are two, like I said, top 10 ranked fighters, uh, both undefeated, both look good in their last fight. Um, I think that's one that's. I think that has the potential to steal fight of the night on that card. I think that one has potential to be a really good fight.
How's Zayas' chin? Because Spomer has got some power.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Well, they both carry some power. Xander's got 12 knockouts in his 20 wins, and Spomer's got 11. So they're both some big punchers. Zayas is tough, and I think Spomer's tough too. So that one, like I said, I'm really looking forward to that one. I think whoever wins this fight is going to take a big step in the super welterweight division, especially right now with Bud Crawford going up. That belt is kind of open. You've got a couple guys. I think Fundura's got a fight coming up soon, but there's not really anybody to really, outside of Boots. But I don't even know if Boots is going to stay at 54. So um, it's a real interesting fight. I think that one's got a lot of title implications on it.
And those aren't the only two really good cards, or really good two fights on the card, man. There's a lot of good
Yeah, I mean,
stuff. Middleweights, too.
yeah, Abdullah Mason is fighting. He's a lightweight, 135 pounds. He comes from the same camp as Davis and Crawford. He's another exciting guy. And the interesting thing with him is, so he's 16-0. He's got 14 KOs. He's a younger guy coming up. But in his last fight, he did get dropped twice.
Wow.
He was in a little bit of a war. He did get the finish in the second round, but he was dropped twice in that fight. So this one he's fighting a guy who Manuel James. He should win that fight, but it's one of those to where looking at it as a boxing fan, yeah, the name may not be what you would expect for Abdullah Mason. Plus, I think James is coming up a weight class, but he has 11 KOs out of 16 wins, so he's a puncher. So it is going to be something, Abdullah Mason's going to have to get back on that horse. He's getting right back in there with another puncher. So we're going to see if he learned anything from his last fight. He should win this fight. I think he should stop James in this fight. But we'll have to see. Like I said, he's a puncher. James is coming off of a loss. His last fight was Rolly Romero, who's also a really good fighter. He lost a decision to him. So it's going to be interesting. Like I said, I think Mason should win that fight. He should probably stop James, but he's going to have to get over the punching power, which was an issue for him in his last fight. So that one's super interesting. You got Vito Melnicki, actually Melnicki Jr. He's another exciting guy. He's 22 years old. He's 20-1, 12 KOs. He also fights in super welterweight division, 154 pounds. He's a guy to keep an eye on. He does have one loss, but like I said, he's super young. He's still just 22, not even really a man yet. And he's fighting Connor Coyle. Connor Coyle is a little late to the party. He's already 34 years old, but he's 21-0. He has 9 knockouts. So this is a good test for Melnicki Jr. I'll be interested in that fight as well. I like Melnicki's style. He's a guy who gets on the gas pedal as well. So it'd be interesting to see him in there with Coyle, who is undefeated, but he's going to be coming in as a pretty decent underdog to Melnicki.
Also on there, you've got a an American heavyweight who's 17-1, Jared Anderson. So something for everybody. And by the way, not no little guys in this fight on this card. I think only one of the fights are guys that you and I could beat up, Hanson. The rest of them,
Yeah, yeah.
oh,
Super flyweight.
yeah, yeah, a bunch of my 135. That's the welterweight division. That's as low as I go. If it's any lower than that, I'm not wasting my time watching it. But Hanson's going to watch it for you. So
Yeah,
um,
I'll definitely watch it.
yes, you will.
Inter
You like the little guys fighting.
I like all of them fighting.
I know you
Any
do. Let's.
type of fight. I like it all. One thing about the Jared Anderson fight. So this fight is super interesting to me because Anderson was a highly touted prospect when he was coming up. But in his last fight, he ran into a guy nobody really heard of at the time in Bacoli. And now everybody knows who Bacoli is. Bacoli is like the second coming of George Foreman. And
Ooh.
when he went in there with Anderson, Anderson looked good early, but he got caught with an uppercut that just changed the whole fight.
Mm,
And then he ended up getting knocked down 3 times and then got stopped later in the fight. But it's an interesting fight. Now, if you look at it, you would think it might be a squash match for Anderson. He's fighting Marios Coelho, and he's the 94th ranked heavyweight. So it's a matchup Anderson should win. But just like the Abdullah Mason fight, Coelho is a puncher. He's got 12 wins and
yeah.
10 of them are knockouts. So he's a guy that Anderson's going to have to stand in there, and he's going to have to work on his head movement. He's going to have to make sure he doesn't make the same mistakes he made against Bacoli because, I mean, with guys that big that hit that hard, it's tough to call anybody chinny, but Anderson wasn't taking those shots well in that last fight. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets hit with something good from Koala. How does he respond to that? So that's the interesting part. It should be a win for Anderson. Like I said, he's in the top 20 in the world. He's fighting a guy that's ranked 94th. It's a guy that's got 3 losses. He should win that fight, but he's going to have to stand in the mirror and face those demons of getting knocked out in his
Yeah.
last fight. He's faced a power puncher, so that is going to be something that's
You
probably
never
on his
know how
mind.
someone's going to react to their first loss, do you?
Exactly. Exactly. Some guys don't respond to it well. I mean, I remember the Felipe Nova kid in the UFC years ago who came in undefeated. He was highly ranked. He got beat in probably his first like big fight, and he never recovered from it. He lost multiple fights after that and never really turned into the prospect they said he was going to be. So yeah, it's interesting seeing how guys bounce back from their first loss, especially when you're highly touted. You go 17-0 to start your career. You kind of look like you're running through people with 15 knockouts. So that'll be really interesting to see how Anderson responds from his last fight.
Anything else in boxing or anything else in this weekend?
Yeah, there is a UFC fight, but it's nothing spectacular. It's a small Vegas card. Jared Cannonier versus Gregory Rodriguez. That is a middleweight fight, 185 pounds. Not really much there. Cannonier's coming off a couple losses. Rodriguez is coming up, but he's older, so it's going to be interesting. Now, it is 2 power guys, so we probably will get a knockout in that fight. But really nothing that's going to move the needle from the UFC. They've got a couple good cards coming up, so this one's kind of just a smaller card. It's in their little Vegas center they have. And they don't even carry many fans in that arena. So nothing spectacular. The main event's a decent fight. The co-main event, Calvin Cater's coming back. He's fighting Yusuf Zolal. They're both coming off some losses, so that one's I think Yusuf got knocked out in his last fight. Cater's a guy that's been around a little bit. He's got really good boxing, so that one's interesting. And outside of that, there's really nothing else on that card that's really going to bring anybody to the TV. Nothing like that. The boxing card we have Friday.
What's the next big UFC fight?
The next big one is going to be UFC 313, and that is on March 8th. That's the light heavyweight title fight. That's 205 pounds. You're going to get Alex Pereira, who has become a superstar in the last probably year and a half. He's going to defend the belt against the Russian guy, Ankalaev. So that's an interesting fight because Ankalaev has really good wrestling. Pereira's an outstanding kickboxer. He has shown that he could struggle to some wrestlers, but Ankalaev has said that he's going to stand and knock Braid out. So maybe he doesn't even try to use his wrestling. So that one's really interesting. But that's March 8th. Um, next weekend we got on the 22nd, you got a huge boxing card. So I doubt UFC really wanted to compete with that. And then you've got just a small card on March 1st. So nothing till March 8th with the UFC, nothing really noteworthy, but got some good boxing coming up. A lot of good boxing coming up.
Good. We can't wait. Of course, I'm a big boxing guy. I'm not a big UFC guy. Been following boxing since the end of Muhammad Ali's career. So, and of course, you and I will talk about all of it as it happens. And let's talk about what happened last week. Um, you previewed a fight. Give me some details.
So last week was Strickland and Dricus Duplessis.
Right.
Um, it ended up being kind of a lackluster fight. You know, not making excuses, but Strickland came out after he had staph infection. He also said he had some injuries he's dealt with during fight camp. He really just didn't fight like he normally does. Now, granted, I still thought Dricus was going to win regardless, but Strickland really didn't bring anything like he normally does. Normally, he's a high pace kind of guy who puts a lot of pressure on his opponent, a lot of jabs, a lot of forward boxing that he likes to do. He's a straight puncher, so he doesn't really wing stuff. So he can usually stay in the pocket and stay on top of guys, but he just didn't have that same grit about him. He really didn't have the output he normally has. He got his nose broken the third round. He kind of seemed very timid after that. Just really wasn't a strong performance. Dricus, he won the fight. He didn't look spectacular. He kind of looked like he just, he did enough to win the fight. The co-main actually ended up being probably the best fight on there, and it was just because Wale Zhang, she's the female champion at 125 pounds. Um, she fought a girl who was undefeated and was actually the favorite, Tatiana
Mm.
Suarez. And a lot of people thought Suarez was just going to go in there, take Wale down, beat her up, maybe submit her on the ground. And in the first round, she did. She got her down fairly easy, but she wasn't able to do much damage on the ground. And then I think that also gave Wale the confidence that, like, hey, even if she takes me down, she's not really having much success. So I think that changed the fight. And from there on, Wale just ran away with it. I mean, she just picked her apart on the feet. She started engaging in the clinch and in takedowns, and she kind of just dominated the fight.
Mm.
And like I said, she was an underdog going into it. A lot of people expected her to lose, and she put on a really good performance. I mean, good enough to where they're talking about doing her and Bullet Valentina next. And Valentina is the 35 champ. So that could be interesting. That could be probably one of the biggest women fights in UFC history if they
Mm.
do put that together. So that'll be something to look out for. But outside of those two fights, it wasn't a strong card to begin with, and then with the main event not really delivering, just really wasn't a great night for the UFC.
And it happens. But I will say this: the one advantage the UFC has over boxing is you do see a lot of upsets.
Yeah,
You see a lot of what you would call style fights,
right.
where
Well,
styles win matchups.
Well, yeah, in the UFC, there's a lot of 50-50 fights. In boxing, we're used to seeing a lot of 80-20 fights. A lot of
Sure.
guys protect their records in boxing. That's why I
Yes.
really like where it's headed. I feel like boxing is headed in a really good direction. Like I said a couple podcasts ago, that Turkey guy from Saudi Arabia has really changed things. He's basically just like a fan with a ton of money, and he's putting it in boxing. And basically, what he's doing is he's proven what many suspected all along. It's just the promoters that aren't making the fights.
Yeah. It's,
He's showing that if you pay these guys, they'll fight the other great fighters, and that's what's happening. He's building these cards, and he's saying to these guys, look, I'll pay you the money you deserve, but we're going to have 50-50 fights. We're not doing no more of these fights where you're just going to go in and walk through these guys, collect a check, and go on and do the same thing, a few months down the road. He's putting them in fights where you're getting 50-50 fights, and I mean it's been awesome. The last probably I'd say half a year to a year when he's kind of taking over and having these cards. the Riyadh seasons, what they call them. He's putting together. I mean, he's putting together some of the best cards you've seen in boxing since I've been alive. And the next two are just as good. I mean, he's got this tournament planned that he wants to do with Haney, Garcia, Tiafimo, and all of them, which that would be amazing because that's one of the best classes. You know, your 54 class, you're getting all those guys. You get the top four, maybe top eight if he can get them all in. And he wants to have like a little small tournament with them, which is going to be coming up. You know, like I said last time, he signed
Yeah.
Inouye to 2 fights. He's getting all the guys, and like I said, it's showing that these guys do want to fight the best. I feel like it was always the promoters that were trying to protect these guys zeros. You know, everybody wanted to be undefeated. They didn't want to start fighting guys because they got older and really wanted to collect checks. So I really like where boxing's headed. I'm very excited for the next year in boxing.
Corruption has always been a major issue in boxing since
Yeah,
way back before even you and I were born. So
yeah, I read about it all the time. You know, I'm a big Teddy Atlas fan, so I listen to his podcast. He talks about it all the time how the promoters were always the ones that kept these guys from taking the big fights because they want to put more money in their pockets. And it's kind of, you know, like I was saying earlier, with Top Rank losing the ESPN deal, with what Turk's been able to do, that's really not a bad thing for Top Rank because he's putting together the cards that are so well, anybody's going to carry them. You know, you don't have to have a certain TV deal to where you're only getting paid certain amount for these fights because
right.
he's building these cards that are so good. You know, everybody's going to want to carry them. So now he can shop them around, get the best, you know, deal. So then he can pay the fighters better. So I like I said, I think boxing's headed in a really great direction.
Thanks so much to Hanson for joining the Central Indiana Sports Report again. For those of you who don't know, Hanson worked for me at a newspaper for a few years. We always had a good time talking fighting and other sports. Hanson is also a big baseball guy, loves football, basketball. We love to talk sports and look forward to continuing this relationship on the Central Indiana Sports Report. It's all coming together. It's all coming together as I planned. It's been a little slower than I expected, but we're putting together a team of experts in sports from high school sports to we're going to be adding some IU, Purdue, Pacers, Colts, IndyCar coverage as well. And we love having Hanson on the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, or follow us so you don't miss a single segment. Just search Central Indiana Sports Report. We are very easy to find. And it would be very helpful to us also if you would tell a friend about the Central Indiana Sports Report. The Central Indiana Sports Report is a product of ITG Media, and I love Susie.